Hey, howdy, hey, my brewing brothers and sisters. I'm Jamel Zanishev.
I'm Travis Campbell.
And I'm Mike Persine, and you're listening to Brew Strong.
All right. Tonight, our special guest is our good friend, Michael Mufasa Ferguson, uh, who I've known for forever.
Quite a
Uh,
while.
wow. It's got to be back since maybe 2006, 2004.
Maybe before that.
When were you working at brewing at in Vegas?
In Vegas, wow, I started there in the mid 90s, but right about 98, I guess, not mid. But yeah, so I started there and I went until 2004.
Okay, so it must have been 2003 or something like that, maybe 2002. About 20
Yes.
years.
Yeah, that's ancient history now.
Very nice.
Neither one of us is aged.
No,
Seasoned.
actually, you look very good. In fact, I might compliment all of us
You as well,
for
my friend.
looking well.
Thank you.
Travis, your problem is probably lighting related.
Certainly. Lighting, jeans. That looks like Bobby Abear, but it's really like you can't see his his what do you call Death's little scimitar thing, you know? Yeah, that's who that
Oh,
is.
The
the
Grim Reaper
scythe.
there.
Grim
Yes.
Reaper.
Light.
Yeah,
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 there you go. All right. One thing I wanted to mention before we go too far is the show is brought to you by Blickman Engineering. And the fine folks at Blickman Engineering, besides paying for this show, so you don't have to, they have their big uh, sale coming on, their big Black Friday sale. Uh, and it is going to be special announcement here. I don't think they've sent this out yet, but this is going to be starting Monday, November 25th through Cyber Monday, December 1st. So they're going to have all the full details available Sunday night, November 24th. So you can go to the Blickman Engineering site or the Anvil site, and you can sign up with your email address. They'll send you a notification letting you know all their specials going on and everything like that. But it is, let me see here, sorry. But they're going to have all sorts of stuff on sale, and it's Anvil and Blickman Engineering, and you can even get gift cards if you want. So I think it's a perfect, awesome way of getting yourself, if you want to upgrade your system or you're just starting out, check it out. It's blickmanengineering.com, Blickman with like a B and a Lickman in there. And the fine folks there, I'm sure it's going to be a spectacular sale.
they've been clearing out some of their older stock and stuff, so I'm looking forward to seeing what they put on sale because I think it's going to be their newest stuff. I think it's gonna be
Yeah.
an outstanding sale coming out. Yeah.
They got a lot of nice stuff lately. It's I've been looking at it. I picked up one of their old Robo Brews, but
Mhm.
I'm I was looking at some of those um, newer ones they have. Looking pretty good. A lot of good upgrades.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
they're always thinking in engineering. They make stuff that will last a lifetime, but
Mhm.
you know, every once in a while, you got to treat yourself to a little toy,
Yeah.
Yes.
a little goodie.
Yeah.
I mean, why
I'm
why
a,
else work?
yeah.
And they
I
stand
got the
behind it.
Riptide. I love that
Oh
thing.
yeah. Dude, those
Yeah.
pumps look great. I don't
Yeah,
need
it
a
works
pump
great.
right now, but those pumps look outstanding.
The Riptide, they're wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got one of those. I got the auto sparge. I buy all his gadgets. I got the beer gun.
Well,
Yeah,
I have the
I'm,
beer gun. I mean, you
yeah,
kind of
you
have
gotta
to,
have one of those. Yeah.
And I have to tell you that lacing on that IPA of yours is very nice.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
It is very
Mike just
nice.
won gold for his West Coast IPA, and it's
In
the
Nevada,
Nevada
State Homebrew Cup.
State. There you go.
So
Yeah,
big one.
you've always been very focused on making great IPAs.
Yeah. Feels good to get some recognition. So
There you go.
Excellent.
The medal shows up.
Attaboy.
You have to take a picture with the jewelry. Take a good shot, a money shot somewhere.
Yeah, it was
Show
in
the
Vegas,
hardware.
so they're gonna mail it to me. So
You didn't
I'm
go?
waiting. No, I couldn't make it. I had
Ah, boo.
couldn't do it, but
Yeah.
It's so
Still.
far away.
oh
I love
yeah,
going to Vegas.
yeah. I would have, but I
Especially-
just couldn't swing it. So
He's in Reno. It's not
Yeah.
that far. There's a like a
8-hour drive.
completely empty freeway between one and the other.
Yeah.
Then you're
I'm
not
sure he's-
driving like you're in Nevada, because if it's taking you 8 hours or whatever, you know, that pedal goes a little further down. You just keep pressing that thing, and
Should be right about
Pretty
6 hours.
Yeah, you could probably cut 2 off if you're,
Yeah.
like you said, driving like you're in Nevada.
Yeah, I used to drive up there all the time for the old El Dorado brew fest they used to put on.
Nice.
yeah.
Yeah, with all the brews and blues, I believe, and barbecues.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
those
At
are
the
good
Eldorado.
times, man.
Yeah, there's a
Back
lot
when
of
there was
great,
only about 600 breweries, not 10,000.
a lot
Yeah.
of great things in Reno.
Yeah.
Um,
Do it okay up here.
all right. So we're going to talk about decoction tips and tricks. Michael is a excellent award-winning brewer, both professionally and homebrew. Has done everything in brewing from one end to the other. But one of the things he's always been passionate about is decoction brewing and the value that decoction brings to a beer. And so with all his knowledge of decoction, we thought, what better show to do than, learn all his tips and tricks. So if you're doing a decoction like Mike is planning on doing here in the not too distant future, maybe he can pick up a few pointers and make an award-winning decocted beer as well. I just not too long ago, I did a double decoction for a Dusseldorf alt beer. Turned out spectacular. And, I think you can taste the difference of decoction. It's just, yeah, I can't be so lazy, I'm too lazy most of the time. But yeah. So you want to kick this thing off, Travis?
Yeah, so I can't define it so well because maybe it's a little bit broad. Let's start off with a short definition of decoction. What is decoction?
Okay, so decoction comes from a term that they used to use for making medicinals hundreds, thousands of years ago. Basically, it's you boil something to concentration to increase its the amount of the substance within a liquid. And the Germans, among others, I mean, you've heard of the Party-Gauss system and things like that. Well, the Germans and in that area there, they started using decoction to concentrate their brews, but mainly to raise the temperature from one rest to the next rest, and then to the next rest. So in doing this, there was a kind of a byproduct, because there was this melanoidin production, natural melanoidin production, that happens when you take a third of the mash and you boil it. Now you have to be very careful, because boiling the mash is very thick. It's not like you're making a wit beer where you do a turbid decoction, which is mostly liquid. You're using the main part of the mash to actually do this. So you got to watch out for scorching, because the scorched mash is just the worst flavor. You can't get rid of it. It just, you got to throw it away at that point.
Can't call it
So
a Rauch beer at that point.
No, because
I had that question. I did. I had that question about that.
Well, burnt is different from smoke. Okay, so and you can this is a difference you can taste.
We could
So
come
it's
up
like
with a
making
new style.
yes, burnt beer.
Burnt beer.
But you'd have to call it something. What's another term for burnt?
But I know you didn't say better or worse than smoke. You just said different.
Well, okay. The reason I said that is because
He's being nice.
I'm being nice. Yes. Now I do like smoked beers.
Okay.
Don't get me wrong. Some of them get a little bit,
Mhm.
intense. But
Mhm.
going back to decoction, uh, there's a number of ways to use decoction. You don't have to do 3 decoctions like it is rumored that Pilsner Urquell uses. You don't need under modified malts in order to do a decoction. A decoction could be done anywhere. And then this is what I tell people. They go, well, with the super modified malts, you don't really need decoction. And I say, then why did they make a grain called melanoidin? So that you could replace the flavor of a decoction.
Interesting.
Right. So if you do a decoction, you could go sans melanoidin. Yes, granted, it was designed to explode more of the proteins and starches when we're using under-modified grains, and we generally have to go out of our way to find under-modified grains at this point in the industry. We sell it at the Farm Boy Brew Shop. We do sell the floor malted under-modified malt, but I don't think that that's something that you have to have in order to do a decoction, because if you look at the science behind concentrating something, behind caramelizing something, behind making natural melanoidins, there will be a difference. Now, can everybody taste the difference? Probably not. The palates at this on this panel, they probably can. Okay, I have one famous time at the National Homebrew conference before it became HomebrewCon, and the there was a big club that did 3 different beers: decoction, no decoction, melanoidin additive, and I was giving a talk on decoction, my passionate talk on decoction, and they came up. It's like, well, let's see if you could tell the difference. I was mortified because I really, if I blew it, there goes my reputation, there goes the whole thing. But then using my own words, and when I tasted the difference, and it became obvious which one was the decoction. There's a depth, um, there's layers, there's things that happen that you just don't get when you use melanoid malt. All right. Yeah, it's a good substitute, but it doesn't go across the board with all the things that happen when you boil part of the mash. Okay. It's just different. I mean, scientifically, it's different. The end result is going to be different. And I think that it enhances certain things in a beer. Now, granted, you're going to be concerned about pH and things like that, reassimilating um, enzymes, because you've just destroyed a third of them when you did this, and you're going to destroy a bunch more when you add it back. That's why you have to wait for a half hour, 40 minutes in between, so that those enzymes build back up. All right. And these are the sort of things that you want to be careful with, other than scorching your grain, when you build your recipe. Now, when it comes to mash pH, I always did an acid rest and a protein rest before I did a decoction.
Let's take a quick break, and when we get back, we can kind of go into some of those things. We'll be back right after this. All right, we're back. You're listening to Brew Strong. Our special guest this evening is Michael Mufasa Ferguson.
Indeed.
Take two. Take two.
Take 3, take 4. Take as many as you need. He's a good friend of the show, good friend of the Brewing Network, and a good friend to many homebrewers and pro brewers alike, and quite the expert on decoction. And so we were just talking about acid rest, and I was at Paulaner, Knocklenburg, and talking to the head brewer there, and they have a automated system that allows them to do triple decoction automated.
Wow.
This is the
Wow.
very first brew plant built to do triple decoction,
I'm
automated
jealous.
triple decoction.
Wow.
So they just punch in their parameters, and it handles the rest. And so they use decoction a lot, and they'll use like a single on their Hellas, and they'll use a triple on most everything else. And yeah, they start with an acid rest. They start, somewhere around 113, I think it is. I think it's like 42, 62, 72.
Right. I used to go in at 104 and then take it up to 113
Mhm.
and then consider the decoctions after that.
And the reason you were doing that, the acid rest was is pH, important in a decoction more so than in a single infusion, or?
Well, pH is important across the board, right? You don't want it to fight the yeast. You don't want it to be too tart. And for 18 years, I brewed basically Reinheitsgebot. So adding acid was not something we did, right? So we did not put anything in to change the pH.
Mhm.
So an acid rest was something we had to do just to make sure that we were going to set the pH to where we wanted it to be.
Mhm.
And this is the same thing with your buddies over across the pond. Them doing an acid rest is absolutely necessary because you want to make sure that that pH is attained, for the rest of the brew. That's why I would say that if you are going to do a decoction, you should probably do an acid rest, unless of course you're going to add some sort of compound to bring up the pH or lower the pH.
Mhm.
I still try to use as little additives as possible.
Mhm.
That hasn't stopped me from using ALDC. Let me tell you, that stuff is beautiful. So I suggest that you do either, you set your pH one way or the other. Just because I did a rest doesn't mean that everybody has to do it that way. But if you're doing a decoction, I'm a traditionalist and I like to do things the way things were done. Yes, I don't want to go back to where we're using stone vessels and wooden cask, but unless you need to. But there are some things I think that are important to carry on from the oldsters like me to the youngsters out there that are in the that are just now getting into the brewing industry, like Mike.
No, I'm
I
just
think
kidding.
I
I'm just
think
the
there's
young gun on the show.
well, that makes you way younger than me. the the point is that there there are things to learn from history. There are things to learn from tradition. I'm not saying that everybody should go out there and make things the way they were made, but I think that you could borrow the things that work from
Mhm.
historical procedures and
Mhm.
carry them into the future.
Well, as you said, Mike, Mufasa, as you said, you could taste the difference. So if you're chasing that flavor, you're gonna have to try it.
You're going to have to try it. And I think
Yeah.
that once you do a decoction, and it doesn't require 3 decoctions all the time. When I did it professionally, I only had a 3-vessel system and it took 16 hours to do. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, because I had to go back and I had to wait and back and forth. The fastest part was boiling the grain because I had an agitator that was faster than a double Dutch, jump rope. So it was flying around there and nothing scorched on the bottom of that. Plus, it was multiple steam jackets, so you didn't have to worry about direct flame or anything like that scorching it. Now, when you do it at home, I suggest now you don't always have to stir constantly, but depending on what kind of system you have, if you're using a direct flame, I would stir more than often. And what I set up before I left Las Vegas was I basically used a paint stir,
Auger, yeah.
right,
Yeah.
auger, and attached little copper chains to it, so I would have some sort of copper drag that goes in there, and I just attached a drill to the other end, and that's what I used.
Hmm.
You could put a 4-way brace on it and just lock it into low speed, and it just would stir the thing for you. 20 minutes
Nice.
later, half hour later, you're ready to go. All right. And this was not something that I bought in the store. This is something I built myself. So, I mean, um, it's just one of the things that, um, you know, back in the old days, you had to do. There was
Right.
many things that had to be done. You just couldn't go to Blickman and say, hey, do this for me. like you can now. So I'm also not suggesting that you go out and build your own equipment, but I do believe that if you try a decoction, that you're going to like the result.
I like the idea of the automated stirrer thing.
Mm.
You could get a gear motor off of eBay and just build something yourself.
Yeah, it'd be pretty easy to do. You just have to make sure that you get the right materials. You don't want anything that's you don't want to use any aluminum that's going to fall apart with
Right.
a low pH or anything like that. But which has been linked to Alzheimer's. I try to make it
Mhm.
a very important thing. It's like when you're home brewing, I know you got that big old turkey pot out there, but generally they're aluminum. Don't use it. Just don't use
You try and mention that every time you're able to remember, is what you're saying?
it.
Oh,
About
so
what?
well,
What were you talking about? Um,
Uh,
so I had a quick one. Would you say it's fair to say that like with decoction, it's like you're trying to take that extra step as a brewer, home brewer, to really squeeze that last maybe 5% of flavor complexity and depth and body to really take that last, one of the last steps, kind of to really go from you're making good lager, even award-winning lager, to like you're trying to just be this lager that people can't get enough of, kind of thing. Is that fair to say with decoction? What your goals are there?
I think it is fair to say, because if you taste, a decocted, Czech lager made right, you you can't go back. I mean, you can't imitate that flavor.
Right,
It's very difficult to do. Before we went live, you were talking about Hefeweizens,
right,
right?
yep.
And you were thinking about decocting Hefeweizen, right?
Yeah. I've actually stepped Hefeweizens. I've actually done,
Oh yeah.
ferulic acid to the beta alpha mash out, but I do that with the rims. I don't decoct, but from what I've heard from a local brewery does decoction with their Hefeweizen, and that's, I feel like that might be the last couple percent of complexity and body and flavor that I need. So
It's amazing, but
yeah,
here's a proof positive type story. Um, Back when Michael Jackson was alive, I had won my third award for Hefeweizen, and so he was interviewing all the winners, and he was talking to me, and he asked me, he goes, "So how did you make your Hefeweizen?" I said, "Well, I use a single decoction in it." And he goes, "A quick little note: all three of the medal winners, gold, silver, and bronze, all used decoctions
nice.
that
in the
year."
hell.
And it's like,
Okay.
okay, to me this proves something, right? And it proves to me that that little tiny bit of seasoning that maybe you can't taste, but it makes you go, wow, this is just different
Yeah.
enough to be excellent, right? And that is what we're looking for when you do that. I mean, when you get to a certain level, of brewing, I mean, you could you could only push the envelope so far, and then after that, it's all baby steps. It's all like 1% here, 1% there, maybe 2% there, but those count, right? Once you
Yeah.
get to a certain level, you want that little, just to reach
Right
just a
at the
little bit
margin. Yeah.
beyond,
Yeah.
and just push that margin out just a little tiny bit so you get more words on the paper. This is what decoction does, as far as I'm concerned.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Well, thank you. I'm gonna do it.
Good.
Yeah, I feel you.
Because like I said,
Excellent.
I step with the rims, but I think I'm gonna do that step from alpha to beta, or beta to alpha, excuse me, with decoction next time. So
well,
Right. So go
that's
ahead.
my question. So let's say you're doing a Hefeweizen, and you could do the steps anywhere. Is it better to do, an acid rest and step from there using decoction, or is it better to, you do your acid rest, just raise your temp some other way through a rims or herms or something like that, and then do a decoction to go from, one to the other, or for mash out, or I'm sure it
Well,
makes a difference.
it does make a difference. And if you're doing multiple decoctions, you pretty much have to start right after the protein rest.
Hmm.
But if you're doing a single decoction, I like to do it in that in between step, not the one that's at mash out, but the one that's just before mash out.
Hmm.
I think that gives the rest of the mash a better chance to reassimilate, all the enzymes that you need, because face it, when you're doing a step mash, whether it's with decoction or with a rims or herms, you are getting all the opportunistic, places where enzymes do their work. That's the whole point of doing a step mash. You could have a drier lager, of a lighter beer, but you don't want it to be so light or so flat or so nondescript that it's not exciting. I think every beer made can be exciting, right?
Yeah.
Styles don't make the excitement, all right? Process and brewers make the excitement, right? Recipes make the excitement. And I think that when you get all that stuff working on all the cylinders, you can't help but win.
Very nice. Yeah, because I would have, especially you mentioned two different styles of beer that when I think of decoction, I think of why aren't they brown? Czech pills and half. So it's very interesting that you're able to develop the flavor without developing more color than is appropriate.
Exactly. And so when you're doing a decoction, it's not so much like, it's not like you're caramelizing onions. You don't want that color to change. So that's why you need a pretty swift stir if you want to keep it light, right? Which is why I wanted to do the automated one. Now I've brewed with buddies, CIA and otherwise, and I am associated with CIA. I am an actual member of CIA. So
not that CIA.
No,
You're
not that
supposed
CIA.
to blow your cover. Yeah. Now we're gonna have to send the helicopter and take you.
Ah, yes, the men in black.
Right.
the I just think that if you do it right, you're not going to change the color so much as the flavor. It's like making a roux or making brown butter or something like that. Yeah, you want to do this sort of thing. You're changing color, but you don't want it to burn. Well, when it comes to grain and mash, you don't want to change the color more than a couple of SRM, really, when it comes down to it, or Lovabond, which is what I mostly deal with these days. But
and then you're blending back in that smaller amount into the larger amount, so the color changes even less.
That color changes even less, and that's I think that's the whole thing, because Hefeweizens aren't supposed to be dark unless you're making a Dunkelweiss or something like that. But my Hefeweizens were all just regular German style Hefeweizens, and 3 times the silver medal, always the bridesmaid, never a bride.
Well, on that sad note, let's take another short break. And when we come back, we'll have more tips and tricks for decoction right after this. All right, we're back. We're speaking with our dear friend, Michael Mufasa Ferguson. I just have to slow down is what I have to do.
It does scare me when he says CIA, then he has 3 names, but we should move past that.
All I'm thinking is like Tom Clancy, like where they're gonna come swoop you in on a private jet or something.
On a private jet, and just
we gotta go. This is over.
I love private jets, but not those.
I wouldn't be shocked. I really wouldn't be surprised, Mufasa, if I found out that was your backstory, or and the whole thing I knew was your. I wouldn't be surprised at all. I'd be like,
this whole brewing thing's just a cover.
Yeah. 40 years, it's deep cover, but yeah.
It would make an excellent cover, because this sort of brewing professionally is not too different from making bacteria professionally. So if you were like in the process of trying to make a large batches of, say, E. coli or
I'm really scared now.
Serratia marcescen or something like that, then you would use the same equipment basically.
But
I might skip this Thursday. I might not show up for a homebrew Thursday.
But let me tell you, you couldn't use the decoction on bacteria, but you can use it in beer.
All right. Let's get back to more tips and tricks here. Travis, do you have another bullet on the list there?
Let's see what we have not covered. It's been outstanding. So Mufasa, I'd like to touch on it maybe. The whirly gig you set up, was that on a pro level or was that on a homebrew level?
That was on a homebrew level. On the
Okay.
pro level, I had a Wachsmann Brau Technic, where I did my apprenticeship in Ulm. Um,
Okay.
a classmate of Dan Gordon's, Joost Wachsmann, he builds these systems. I installed them in about 5 different Gordon Biersch's, and they have. It's just a beautiful, absolutely beautiful 3-vessel machine on a skid. Just bring it right in. It was right about 30 hectoliters, just about 25 barrels, and it was just a lovely machine. It had 3 speeds on the agitator. It had um, 3 zones, steam zones, so that when you were doing a decoction, you had the bottom steam zone that you could use right there. And because it was an agitator, I could do step mashes simply by using the steam jackets. And it was high pressure steam as well. And then I would put everything over to the lauter tun, and then I would back pump from the lauter tun back into the brew kettle, and I would turn the agitator on high and let that sucker rip for about 30 minutes until it just was a completely changed consistency. You could see that it was no longer this malto meal thing. It became more liquidy. And
Okay.
then you just pump that back, and you have the rakes going real fast in the lauter tun. And so that you're trying not to kill all the enzymes with this hot liquor you're bringing back.
Mhm.
And then you wait, once it all gets in there, you wait 30 to 40 minutes, depending on what your recipe that you came up with, and you let those get back to what you're doing. Of course, you check the temp to make sure that you hit the right temperature. In my particular machine, a third of the mash is what I did. At home, I more likely will use a quarter
Order
of
of
the
the
mash.
mash.
Yeah,
Okay.
right. So
That's it's an impressive adaptation you made of your pro equipment into the whirly gig. That I have to say, the one time I visited the Decoctionist, they weren't using your fancy whirly gig. I think you had somebody over there slaving away, spinning, spinning, spinning. At Josh's house, I was there one time. I don't know if you were there or not. I just happened to show up, buy some grain or something. But yeah, that's outstanding that you were able to adapt that. And a lot of obviously what we want to do is make sure homebrewers understand how to use your vast knowledge that's a professional level and also homebrewer level. Um,
One quick question here on what you just said was, so you say a quarter of the mash for on homebrew scale. Now, how are you defining a quarter of the mash? I can hear people asking this question already. Are you talking about the total volume of the mash or a quarter of just the thick part of the mash?
I'm talking about the total volume of the mash, and that
Okay.
you're going to be, when you're scooping it out, um, it's going to be the thick portion, not the watery portion.
Right.
okay.
Those, like I said, those sort of decoctions are reserved for wit beers and white beers, if they even do them anymore. I doubt that they do, but it's something that called a turbid decoction, that a lot of the big wit makers in Belgium used, back in the day. Now they probably don't have to, or don't want to, or don't find it necessary, but that was part of the things that they used to do at the time. Once again, historical brewing, um, coming back. I mean, we don't want to go back to the 1500s in brewing, but we definitely want to pick and choose all the stuff that works for us as modern day home brewers and as modern day brewers, professional brewers.
Yeah. So, uh, what is the more liquid turbine mash for a wheat beer? Because now people are going to want to start making those. Can't mention it, and
I
I
did.
explain it.
Right.
Provide a 3-page recipe for it.
Yeah, basically you're going to, it's going to, the liquid you take out from a wit beer, which is generally a very small amount of grain compared to, say, an IPA or a Dunkel or any big beer, because wit beers are usually very low in alcohol, and they take very little grain, because you're looking for a dry, low alcohol beer, not really a a big beer, unless you're making some sort of double wit, which kind of defeats the purpose of the flavor profile.
Mhm.
But you're going to take liquid out that's only about a third grain. Okay,
Oh, really?
and that is what they refer to as the turbid decoction. And so if you ever took that sort of out of that sort of beer, if you ever took that out of the mash, it's going to look almost milky right prior to the decoction.
Mhm.
So because it's like mostly just this water, it hasn't really infused anything from the grains, and the grains are all light grains anyway. I mean,
Mhm.
after all, the word for wheat and white is wit. So
Right. Yeah,
so
make
it
sure there's wheat in that mash.
right. So you put that, you bring that to the side and you use that because you're not trying to get a bunch of color, but you are trying to get some intensity, right, with the turbid decoction, as opposed to what you're getting with the big melanoid production with a thick decoction.
Now, a question really quick. You're talking about doing this before you get to like gelatinization temperature, so it is
Yes,
kind of that milky, like during the protein rest, let's say. Okay, that's what
right.
I wanted
It's
to
right
confirm.
after the protein rest, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the way I've done it. I'm sure there's other people out there that have done it differently, but like I said, I'm not trying when it comes to a wit beer. I'm not trying to get color out of it. I just want a little bit of intensity, that little tiny bit of seasoning,
I
I
wonder
am
if
starting to believe you've done this a few times. I'm
once or
getting there. Yeah.
twice.
does that help with the haze of the thing as well? I mean, are you somehow freeing up the proteins that are the same length as like hordenes, and it's providing haze to the wit beer as well?
Um, I have noticed that turbid decoction has a better haze retention than ones that don't use decoction. Yes.
Wow. Now we're gonna have decocted Nipas.
Hey, I was
Hey.
actually thinking about it
I was thinking about it too.
because not so much this turbid decoction, but I always think what really makes a hazy IPA really exceptional is when that malt is a lot of body, nice in depth, and kind of this complexity that supports this juice flavor or whatever flavor you're going for. But I'm like, I was doing all the research for this show, and now I'm peaked. I want to try this on every style, see what happens.
Well, I mean, remember that this is how it had to be, no matter what
Right,
style you were making, because you didn't
Right.
have a rims or a herms, right? So you
right,
had to boil the mash in order to get to that next step. And
yeah,
I mean, basically, I guess they used back then, pre-thermometers, it was the rule of thumb. If you could stand your thumb being in the mash, you were at the right temperature. So I mean, it's very different now, obviously, but I honestly believe that hazies can benefit from decoction.
yeah.
I've
All
never
That's
right.
what
tried
I
it.
think.
I'm gonna have the one in Ovanik when you talk them into doing it.
Okay, I will attempt to talk them into doing it. But first, we try it on a 5-gallon scale.
It-
I,
it-
so just to
Five
follow up on
gallons.
that, are there any styles you would not recommend doing a decoction with? Are there any kind of
Any light beer,
don't do
any
it?
yeah, any light beer, unless you're making it like an amber light beer. Like you want more. The problem I have with a lot of light beers is they taste okay, but they taste watered down and they lack body. So if you're trying to make one that is more interesting and has perhaps a deeper color, because a lot of them look so pale, they look like urine samples. So I would rather have a little bit more of a I think it's Yingling, one of their light beers is an amber.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's the main one, I think.
yeah, and that is so cool. I really like the fact that they did that. It has way more body and way better flavor than a normal light beer. So I think any beer could actually benefit from it.
And when you say
I'm
light beer, you're
literally
talking
drinking Yingling.
nice. I guess for the audience, when you say light beer, you're not just talking light color. You mean light
No,
flavor,
I mean
right?
like 100-calorie beer. That's a big thing
Yeah,
lately.
your American light lagers.
Bud
Your
Light.
Yeah, Bud Light, Miller Lite. But I mean, we had a winner here last year. New Magnolia won silver for their Heights Light Lager, or was it gold? Travis, do you remember?
I don't.
Okay, it was either silver or gold, but I mean, it was very good, a very good beer. But I would have liked to have had just a bit more body in there. Um, you know, Without changing the caloric content, you could still have more body, and I think that
and
they should do that.
I was going to follow up with that because I was listening to a really interesting podcast. This guy from Human Robot in Philadelphia, and he is convinced that, or he's not convinced, he was actually taught that doing a beta rest and stepping to an alpha rest, contrary to convention, actually adds body, not takes it away. Because the thought is, well, if you give each enzyme its own turn, it's going to be super, dry. But his contention is when you step through these different ranges, and then he says with decoction it gets even better. That adds body, and so I wanted to ask if that is something that is concurrent with your experience.
I think that you're correct about that, because I mean, I did a lot of step beers that had plenty of body, um, and it also depends on the length of the rest. Modern breweries now, they do they do a conversion test and boom, they're done. That's it. They're gone, because like they want to do 9 brews in a day, right?
Right.
As a craft brewer and as a home brewer, you want to make a really good beer when you're making it. And
Right.
so I think that people should, if they're doing steps, I think they should look at how long these steps are, right? And if they're getting their full amount of conversion per step. And
Hmm.
sometimes that takes a little bit more time than they want to deal with.
You
Um,
mentioned your day's a long day.
yeah, I mean, you want to do everything at the right steps. So when you're doing your steps, Mike, um, how long are your rest?
So off the top of my head, I believe each rest is 30 minutes.
Oh, okay. See, that's a good long rest. I
Yeah,
don't believe
and
all the rests have to be that long. I think the beta and
okay.
alpha rests need to be that long. I think the
Yeah,
protein
that's what I meant.
rests and the acid rests don't need to be that long.
Yeah, those are more
Right.
10 for me, 10, 15.
Exactly. Okay. See, so that's pretty good. But I know people that do rests that are only 15 minutes long, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure you're getting the complete.
Yeah,
Conversion.
and my other thing I do is I don't start the timer till I hit the temp. So like
Well,
that
yeah,
period in between doesn't count. So and
it
that's why it
shouldn't.
takes 2 hours.
Right. It shouldn't
Yeah.
count, right?
Yeah.
It's when you hit the temp.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, that ramp, all fine and good. Whatever it's doing there, that's fine. But you don't
Yeah.
start that rest until you reach temp.
And I would think with decoction, that ramp is instantaneous. Like as soon as you get that decoction back into the mash,
It's like boom, yeah.
it's like another mash in, another
Right.
strike.
But then
Yeah.
you let that rest happen for a very long time.
Right.
Because you not only want those enzymes to rebuild, but you want them to do their job, which is why you're going to wait that lengthy period in between decoctions while you're letting that rest go. So,
Right.
half hour, 40 minutes is not unusual for that sort of rest.
Right.
So Mufasa,
Yeah.
with all this side bullying, etc., it struck me, and I don't know. Well, maybe you thought about it, maybe you didn't have to think about it as much. A lot of homebrewers these days focus on their water. Are we extra concentrating our water chemistry? Are we doing anything different with our water chemistry to accommodate for these decoctions?
No, in fact, you do have to do less when you're doing a decoction. Now, I remember I suffered under the Rhein-Heinz-Gebot for 18 years, so we didn't do any
Right.
additives. What I did was I added some city water back to my um, RO water to get the ions back up to where they should be. But I did
Okay.
not add any salts.
So I was targeting the best balance you get in any individual location. Was that when you were at Gordon Biersch?
At Gordon Bierce, where I started at Gordon Bierce, we had Hetch Hetchy water, and that was one of the pure sources of water in the United States. Of course, anybody from New York will tell you that can't be true, but Hetch Hetchy is actually pretty damn good. It was perfect for making lagers.
Nice.
And so so that was pretty straight. But when I got to Nevada, the water there is hard enough to walk on. So you
Not
don't want to
here.
use that. That's true. You're in Reno.
We got
Vegas.
Truckee River Alpine snowmelt.
Yeah.
Nice.
But Vegas, I mean, you had everything from depleted uranium to fossil fuels in there, right?
Yeah.
So it was not good water. And if
Whatever.
you were using it straight, you were making bad beer. You know, so I mean, that's all there was to it. And so we had to just step carefully there, you know, because there's a BJ's brewery up in Reno, and you know, we found that the water there was very good to make beer, very good to make.
Yeah, no, I've actually toured that brewery. It's very cool.
Yeah, it is.
Our homebrew club, they gave us a whole tour. It was cool.
I like it. That's good. Yeah, I miss the company. It was a good company to work for.
Nice.
But they didn't do decoctions.
So
they had the system that could. The one in Sacramento could, but they never did that there. You know, production. You gotta
turn and burn.
You gotta turn and burn, man, or we run out of beer. You know. So.
Well, I had one more question about the decoction chemistry. I know this is related kind of to that whole thing, but in this book, I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called How to Brew by John Palmer.
I've got 3 copies, and he signed every one of them.
In the latest, mine's signed too. Yeah, it was awesome. In his latest edition, I hope there's another one coming soon. But he mentions that decoction mash will actually lower the mash pH by anywhere from 1/10 to 0.15. So, and he thinks he actually states that is from the melanoidin acidification reactions happening. So is that also something that you've seen in your experience, or are you going to take old Johnny P to task?
No, I won't take John Palmer to task, because first of all, I appreciate him, I admire him, and he has traveled. He has done his research. He knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
He really does. I just never found it to be an issue, because before, I mean, when I test my mash pH, it was always spot on, right? And yeah, you've got some leeway there, obviously, but I still did an acid rest, and I still I still did the decoction, but I was turning them out at 5.3, so
nice.
So
yeah, I guess that's just
think
one of the indicators of a good decoction is versus a non-decocted mash. It might be 1/10 lower on the pH.
Absolutely, I could see that.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, I did, but if he had said something like, a higher percentage, I would. Yeah, I don't know about that, but no, he softened that punch, so I have to agree fully with John Palmer.
Cool.
I haven't seen him for like a couple of years now. I miss the guy. Yeah.
Neither have we.
Yeah, where has he been? I mean, he goes to South America a lot. I would imagine there's a lot of repatriated Germans down there. I bet you there's a lot of decoctions go on down there.
Yeah, I think John's running drugs down.
That
turns out he's a mule.
He's a mule. That's hilarious. And nobody would stop him.
Swallowing them, or he's stuffing them, one way or the other.
He's got that face. You don't stop John. I mean, he looks like the most innocent guy in the world.
Let me tell you about the metal in that metal detector you're using right now. I can tell you all about. You're like, okay, come on, Brew.
Yeah, no, he's a great guy, and like I said, I would listen to him. Also, he appears to be a proponent of decoction. So
yeah.
I mean, this is nothing new. It's as old as hell. It's older than me. So it's been around for a long time, and it's been used to great extent. And I believe that any Pilsner or Kel you pick up, either over there or in the cans here, because the cans are so much better than those stupid green bottles.
Mhm.
That you could taste that, you could taste the decoction, and it's if you want to know what it tastes like, just put two similar pilsners, one Czech and one something else that you like, and just taste that difference of that back layer of not just maltiness, not just umami, but something extra on the palate there. And you'll see what I mean. It's
Yeah. Again, in that, sorry, real quick, I want to ask you too about this.
Mhm.
You're talking about all these flavors in that podcast with the guy from Human Robot. He was talking about the wave, and when you brew a beer with decoction, it's like a wave of flavor that kind of you get to ride.
Yeah, and
Would you
that's a
kind of
brilliant way
describe
to
it
Ride
that
the
put it.
way?
wave.
Ride
Yeah,
the
ride the
wave.
wave.
That's a brilliant way to just to do it, because if your palate is honed enough, you just keep getting these layers of flavor, and it's like a wave. It's like
Nice.
waves washing over you, and that's a excellent way to put it. I
Cool.
need to talk to this guy.
Yeah. Nice.
All
Yeah.
right, let's do this. Let's take our last break here, and we'll be back right after this. And we're back. We're talking decoction tips and tricks. All the, I think, it's impossible to fully mine your knowledge
Oh, yeah.
of this. What other, uh, tips do you have? It's a couple of rapid fire tips
Right.
you can throw
So
out there.
I think that if you're making an Oktoberfest or a Märzen and you're using something close to a traditional recipe, a decoction is going to make that beer way better than if you don't use one. I
Okay.
guarantee it. Because it should be a combination of various Munich malts. Nowadays, a lot of people are doing Munich and Pilsner and Vienna, but that's not really the traditional way to do it. And if you were using a variety of Munich base malts, you will see that you could carry over that maltiness and then intensify it with a decoction. And I think that all the recipes I see coming through now are the modern recipes. Even Vireman has a modern recipe on their website that is not a traditional recipe for a Oktoberfest Märzen because the world has changed. And and I understand that completely. People are doing things that are lightening beers, are making them lighter and less hoppy and things like that. And I'm not mad at that. That's not something I'm mad at. But I do think that decoctions have fallen by the wayside, and I think that it's that the glib comments like, "Well, with the super modified malts, we don't need it anymore." Yes, for that purpose, you don't need it. You don't need it to modify malts anymore. But
Yeah.
if you want melanoidin production without adding melanoidin malt, I mean, the Germans had to come up with melanoidin malt because it's okay to add malt, just like
Mhm.
acidified malt. It's okay
Right.
to add malt, but it's not okay to add additives. So these are gaping loopholes in the Reinheitsgebot. But
Now, how about something, more of the basics, like if you're going to do a decoction, what's the best type of, scooper to use, and what's the best type of pot to boil your decoction in? You
right.
know,
So and I'm sure that you're gonna, I mean, you're talking about the depth and the circumference.
right.
Um,
Is it better to have a shallower amount of mash in your boil kettle? Or is it better to have a thicker, deeper mash in a skinnier kettle?
right.
Should I be
So
looking at a
at
frying
home,
pan or
at home, I've always used a secondary pot
hmm
that is not my mash kettle.
hmm
It is not my boil kettle.
right.
It is a stainless steel spaghetti pot. basically, and I will scoop up, you know, 1.5 gallons of mash into that, you know, and use my drill and just let that sucker go. Now, be very careful with that drill. The steam will get to it, so you might want to use a silicone shield so that it doesn't get into the coils of the moisture doesn't get into the coils of the drill. But if you're not using a drill, you could like you said, you could use some sort of gear setup that would work. My first brew house I worked on had a bevel gear agitator, right? That was re-engineered to go with a belt drive instead. But if you're using a drill, you might want to get it so it stands up pretty high. For the sake of using a drill and for the sake of using my 4 cross member support, I used a deep pot because I wanted the drill farther away from the stuff. But it's still the same circumference of the spaghetti pot because that was the same circumference as the paint mixer. Okay, so I put that in there, and I'm still a proponent of copper in brew houses, so I attached copper chains to it, drag chains, and that helps because the paint mixer doesn't go all the way down to the bottom, but the chains do, and that's what scrapes the bottom, keeping the mash free. So I don't think it matters as much with the circumference, but I will say this: if you have a larger circumference, say like a 4-inch saute pan or something like that, you are going to lose more moisture than you want to. All right, because that surface area is going to release more steam than and therefore water, and you really want to keep that kind of concentrated. You want that liquid to stay in the pot. So I would reduce circumference as opposed to increasing circumference.
Because you might end up drying it out too much and scorching much more easily.
Absolutely. You know, so you want that quart to quart and a quarter amount of grain, you know, to pound, you know, a pound to a quart to a quart and a quarter of grain. That's how thick you want that. It's pretty thick, but you don't want to lose a lot of moisture.
Right.
That's diminishing returns on that.
Okay. What about pulling the mash out? Is there any tips on safety or anything like that?
Yeah. With the mash, it's not so bad, but with the decoction, yeah, there's some safety tips there. But when you're pulling the stuff out of the mash, I like to use basically one of those kind of like they use on the woks. It looks like a strainer with holes in it. It's about that big around. It's got a handle on it, and it's kind of has a little bit of a bowl shape to it. And if you use that, you notice water's coming out of the bottom, but not a lot because the grain's blocking it from coming. That's what I like to use to scoop my stuff out of the mash.
Okay.
And I use a stainless steel one, and they're pretty easy to come by. Any kitchen store should have them. We actually sell them
maybe
at Farm Boy.
I was about to say maybe some homebrew shops would carry them too.
We carry them.
Nice.
And Mike, you had a question?
Well, I was just
final question.
To go back just real quick to the actual boiling of this decoction. Would you say heat load is a really important thing to watch out for? Like you don't want to overboil it or underboil it. Are you looking for a certain amount of rolling, kind of like in your boil kettle where you want to see a good rolling boil, or are you looking for that big time intense pop and boil or not?
Or are you getting the boil? I mean, you're looking for a temperature shift here.
You're looking for a temperature shift, but you will get to a boil, right? There should be steam coming off that mash,
right?
When you're cooking, and before you start vigorously stirring, you're going to look for bubbles coming up before you start to stir. That's how you know that the base has reached the temperature you want. Now, I hesitate to use direct flame, right? Anymore, although I still do. It's just you got to turn that flame down. You can't have that going like you're trying to boil your wort. You can't do that. but it needs to be intense enough to get those little bubbles popping through, like lava.
Yeah.
Yeah, once you start getting that, you know that you reach there. Then you got to start stirring vigorously. Or some people don't. They just move the stuff around every now and then, and wait for the bubbles to rise again, and move it around again. But I like to get a fast movement because I want a lot of heat in there.
And
Right.
how long do you generally boil your decoction?
Well, professionally, I did it for 30 minutes. At home, I do it for 20.
Mm-hmm.
It's just you just don't need that length of time. You're not dealing with this massive amount, of mash. You're dealing with a much smaller amount, and if you've got the appropriate temperature, I don't think you have to worry, about.
And maybe the deeper the kettle or the deeper the mash, maybe the longer you need to boil it.
Yes,
because
I
you're
agree.
not in contact with the surface there. So the shallower, maybe shorter amount of time.
Shallower, but I wouldn't have it. The circumference too big,
Right, saucepan.
Not in the frying pan. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe when you get better, you can get a little shallower, but to start off, you get it nice and deep and
Yeah.
stir.
And just boil for longer.
And
Yeah.
boil for longer. Yeah.
Okay.
Remember, kids, nice and deep.
Are all Michaels the same? Or do we all cook this way?
Very similar. Very, very.
Hey, it's
I
Brew
see why
Strong. You
were
gotta
on the
get a
Sunday
quip in there.
session.
It's Brew Strong. What are we doing
Is
here?
Bruce right? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you remember my times on the Brewing Network. We got pretty salty on that thing. So I was keeping this one pretty light.
Well, there we go.
Sorry.
Thank you for
Not sorry.
taking the time to join us and share your knowledge about decoction and everything else. You are quite the treasure when it comes to beer information because you've done so much over so many years. It'd be great to have you back again and talking
Anytime
about
you
some
want.
other subject.
Anytime you want. This is
Awesome.
I love this stuff. You guys are great. Mike, it's good to meet you. And you
Great to meet
sound
you.
like a wonderful person to me. And I
Yeah,
know you other
well,
guys.
You too.
And I've known you other guys for years. And Jamil and I go back 20 some years, and that's amazing. And I just it took me a long time to pronounce your last name, though.
Not the first name. You get the first name right.
Oh, the Jamil was easy because that's how he introduced himself. But the Zanishev was I had to look at that several times. Yeah.
Well, there you go. All right. If you're listening live, stay tuned. We're going to have a Q&A session where we will answer your questions that have been sent in. And if you're listening live, you can actually ask questions in the chat. You just go to the comments underneath the video there on Facebook, and you can ask questions there in the comments section. Do you want to stay with us, or do you have
Absolutely.
things you got to do?
No,
You can stay, do another hour.
My job just got easier.
Why not?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right. So if you're listening live, stay tuned. If you're listening on the podcast, then it should be about 2 weeks, and you should see the next episode up. As always, thanks to our fine sponsor, fine sponsors, and Blickman Engineering especially. Don't forget, they're having their big Black Friday sale. It is going to be running from Monday, November 25th through Cyber Monday, December 1st. And the full details are going to drop Sunday night, November 24th, but it's going to apply to BlickmanEngineering.com and the Anvil website as well. And there's going to be lots of great deals, including gift cards, everything else. So check it out. You can go to their website now and sign up for email notifications, and they will send you all the specials and things that are going on. But then you'll be sure not to miss the Black Friday sale, which is a generous 1 week. And where you want to rebuild your system, there you go. All right.
They have two outstanding Facebook pages that everyone should join, and they unfortunately underrepresent themselves there unless someone needs help. But there's an Anvil page and there's a Blickman page. Go sign up, and let's encourage Drew and Jennifer to tell us more about the sales and so forth.
There you go. All right. Until then, brew strong.
Brew strong.
Brew strong.
Brew strong.
Nice.